The Laughing Cavalier here, presenting to you another tale of these troubled times. Today, since it is the 100th anniversary of the end of the First World War, I shall be talking about the role two of my ancestors played in that conflict. Before I begin, I'll recommend you check out the book Battle Beneath the Trenches, The Cornish Miners of the 251st Tunnelling Company by Robert Johns, which details the history of the unit that one of my ancestors served in. This video will look at two of my great-grandfathers on my father's side of the family, who were both from the county of Cornwall. Rather confusingly, both are called William, so the first part of this video will look at the one who served in the Royal Engineers. He was born in the late 19th century to the son of a gold miner, who passed away some time before 1911, when my great-grandfather was in his early 20s. His son would continue the mining tradition, becoming the captain of a tin mine. In 1911 he also married, and the couple have two sons, the second son being my grandfather, who was born in 1914. In August of that year, Britain declared war on Germany, and the country was thrown into one of the bloodiest conflicts it would ever face. By November 1914, it was clear that the small British army was not strong enough, and so a call went out for volunteers. In April 1915, my great-grandfather enlisted in the Duke of Cornwall's Light Infantry, initially being assigned to the 10th Service Battalion, which at the time was forming in Cornwall. My great-grandfather, however, was something of a troublemaker. At 9:30 p.m. on the 22nd of August, he left his barracks in Falmouth without permission, and did not return until 11 a.m. the next day. Whilst the report doesn't mention what he did, it was possible he went off down the pub. He was confined to his barracks for 3 days. A few weeks later, on the 6th of September, he was part of a working party and again left without permission, this time insulting an NCO, for which he was confined to barracks for 5 days. Not long after this, he and many other miners would be transferred to a new unit, the 251st Tunnelling Company of the Royal Engineers. Due to the deadlock on the Western Front, officers were turned to all sorts of alternatives to try and break through the German trenches. The tunnelling companies were formed in order to dig underneath no man's land, plant explosives, and then detonate it right underneath the German lines, usually before a major offensive. The company was formed in October 1915 and was almost immediately put on the front line in the Lewes area. In around 1916, this photograph was taken of the company, and as can be seen, its men came from all over the British Army, including the Highland regiments. On the 10th of August 1917, the company blew the last mine ever fired in the Great War at Givenchy. By this point, my great-grandfather was rising through the ranks. In late 1916, he was made a Lance Corporal, and in early 1918 was promoted to Corporal. At some point as well, this bayonet came into his possession. It was a German one with segregated edges, which was usually issued to the pioneer units of the German army, suggesting that he perhaps took this weapon in hand-to-hand fighting with a German pioneer, although I cannot be certain. By April of 1918, the company was involved in engineering activity between the Lys and La Bassée canals, when, on the 9th of April, the Germans launched Operation Georgette, the second of their great offences of that year. The 55th West Lancashire Division defended Givenchy, and were aided by the tunnellers. I'm not sure exactly what part my great-grandfather played in that battle, but by the end of April he had been promoted to sergeant. When the war ended, he was discharged and he went on to continue mining, except this time in Burma. He passed away sometime in the late 1940s. My other great-grandfather was born in the early 1890s, also in Cornwall. I'm rather fortunate that my father was able to talk to him about his experiences back in the 60s. He was an electrical engineer and worked in the dockyards at Falmouth, which are still going to this day. Interestingly, until a few years ago, we thought he was an only child, which is what my late grandmother thought as well. However, it turns out he had 2 younger brothers and 2 younger sisters, so it is possible there was some sort of family falling out sometime after the war. From what my dad can remember of his conversations with him, my great-grandfather worked in the dockyards in the early 1910s. He claimed to have also been called to help with the fitting out of the RMS Titanic before her maiden voyage, but was thankfully not on board when he set sail, although I personally cannot find anything concrete to say he did help fit her out. He married sometime before the war, and in 1915 his wife gave birth to a daughter, my grandmother. He wouldn't have time to see her for some years though. In May he volunteered for the Royal Navy, was made a wireman, and in July was assigned to the battlecruiser HMS Indomitable, which would be a part of the 3rd Battlecruiser Squadron. In May 1916 the German High Seas Fleet set sail in an attempt to destroy at least part of the Royal Navy, hoping to eventually break the Allied blockade. However, the Germans were intercepted by Admiral Beatty's ships, and the largest naval battle of the First World War was underway. The 3rd Squadron was sailing with Admiral Jellicoe's Grand Fleet and was ordered ahead of the fleet to support Beatty. The battle became infamous though for the loss of 3 battlecruisers that day, prompting Beatty to remark that something seems to be wrong with our bloody ships today. At around 6:30, the Germans sank HMS Invincible, the Indomitable's sister ship. My great-grandfather said he was up on deck at the time and saw her explode. After Jutland, his career was rather uneventful. He was discharged from the Navy in 1919. During World War II, he volunteered as a policeman throughout that conflict. He passed away in the 1970s. It has been 100 years now since the end of World War I, and there are no eyewitnesses left of that conflict, yet the stories remain. My great-grandfather was rather lucky to come back home, although undoubtedly not without repercussions. Thank you for listening. This has been the Laughing Cavalier, wishing you a good day.